You've been hunting for a gaming rig that won't make you spend a weekend tweaking settings, won't break the bank after a year of upgrades, and actually lets you sit down and play the games you love without second-guessing whether the hardware will hold up. That hesitation is real. Most pre-built PCs either promise a mountain of specs you'll never use or hide compromises that bite you when a new title drops. I spent the last week setting up a Skytech Harpy, running a few of the latest releases, and watching how it behaved under a typical household workload, so let's talk about what that actually looks like in practice. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Harpy isn't trying to be a trophy case. It's built around the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D and an RX 9070 XT. Those chips aren't the absolute top of the line, but they're the sweet spot for most 1080p 1440 gamers who want high frame rates without constantly chasing a new GPU launch. In real life, that means you can crank up titles like Elden Ring or Cyberpunk 2077 to high settings and still hover around 7080 frames per second on a 1440p monitor, which is more than enough for a smooth experience on a 144Hz panel. The 24GB of DDR5 RAM feels generous, especially when you throw a browser, Discord, and a streaming app into the mix. I ran a few background downloads while playing Valorant and never saw a dip that would be noticeable in a competitive match. Now, the first thing most people worry about with pre-builts is heat. The Harpy comes with a 360mm AIO liquid cooler, and that isn't just a marketing line. During a 2-hour marathon of Starfield, the CPU stayed comfortably in the low 70 SC range, even when I cranked the in-game graphics to max. The radiator sat neatly at the back of the case, leaving the front panel free for airflow and keeping the whole machine whisper quiet. For a living room setup where the PC sits under a TV stand, that low noise level matters. You won't be hearing a constant hum that forces you to keep the volume down. Storage is another practical point. The 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD loads games in seconds, but it also gives you the breathing room to keep a sizable library without immediately needing external drives. I installed Microsoft Flight Simulator and Red Dead Redemption 2 side by side, and both launched in under 10 seconds. That speed translates into less waiting and more playing, which is the core value you're after when you buy a new rig. What about the power supply? The Harpy ships with an 850W gold-rated PSU that's ATX 3.0 compliant. In day-to-day use, you won't notice the difference, but it gives you headroom if you decide to add a 4K monitor or upgrade to a higher-end GPU later. The downside here is that the PSU is non-modular, so cable management inside the case is a bit messier than a fully modular unit. If you're a neat freak who likes a pristine interior, you might need to spend a few minutes routing cables or consider an aftermarket modular PSU later on. One hidden trade-off that shows up after a couple of weeks is the Wi-Fi. The Harpy includes Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC, rather than the newer Wi-Fi 6 standard. In my apartment, the connection was stable, but the speed caps at about 300 megabits per second, which is fine for most gaming sessions but could feel limiting if you're doing large 4K streams or downloading massive game updates. If you have a solid Ethernet line, just plug in. Otherwise, an inexpensive USB Wi-Fi 6 adapter can bridge that gap without opening the case. Who should consider the Harpy? If you're a mid-range gamer who wants a solid 1080p 1440 experience now and the flexibility to push to higher resolutions in a couple of years, this machine hits the sweet spot. It's also a good pick for streamers who need a dedicated GPU, ample RAM, and a fast SSD, because the 24GB of DDR5 can handle encoding while you play. The included Windows 11 installation is clean, no bloatware to scrub, which saves you the hassle of a fresh OS install. Who might want to skip it? If you're chasing 4K ultra-high settings with ray tracing at 60 frames per second, you'll likely need a higher-tier GPU than the RX 9070 XT. Also, if you're a hardcore overclocker, the 7800 X3D isn't the best canvas for extreme frequency pushes. It's designed for efficiency and game-focused performance rather than raw bench scores. Lastly, if you live in a tiny space and need a compact mini ITX build, the Harpy's mid-tower chassis is a bit larger than you might want. Practical strengths sum up to three things: consistent performance at common gaming resolutions, quiet cooling that lets the PC sit in a shared room, and a storage setup that eliminates the wait for game load frustration. The practical weaknesses are the non-modular PSU, which makes cable tidy-up a little more work, and the Wi-Fi 5 module that may feel dated in a network-heavy household. None of these are deal-breakers for most gamers, but they're worth knowing before you click Add to Cart. If you're still on the fence, think about the